Welcome to The Circle, a queer men's conversation about men's work, men's embodiment practice, men's spirituality, and men's personal growth with an emphasis on how queer men can participate, benefit, serve, and lead in these spaces.
Welcome back to The Circle. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Jeff Shaffer, a nurse and program manager, to discuss how queer men can approach their healthcare with more confidence. By connecting to their truths, queer men can navigate medical spaces with less shame and greater authenticity. We'll explore how men's work provides tools for having more open and honest conversations about our health. Tim and Jeff, are you ready to go all in?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's go. Jeffrey, we're so excited to have you here. To start, could you share a little bit about yourself, the work you do as a program manager, and what inspired you to focus on this area of care?
Sure, thanks. I'm Jeff Shaffer, and I'm a nurse out in Provincetown, and I became a nurse later in life. So about 10 years ago, I became a nurse and started working in a local clinic out here, then became an HIV case manager. And then while I was here, I saw a need for access to sexual health services. We always had these available at the clinic, but because of what Provincetown is and the amount of visitors and the way insurance works, a lot of people might go to the clinic and then be faced with costs their insurance may not cover them. They might be foreign, like lots of different things. They might be here for the summer and not have insurance. So I created a program to take care of those services and make it easier. We've always had, well, not always, we've had access to no-cost testing in town, but what happens when you get something, or if you want to access PrEP, or if you're living with HIV and you need access to care. So I had certain funding, and then the holes in the funding that we had that I couldn't do, I just found ways to do those and started the program. And it's been amazing.
Well, it's an important program, and we're glad that it exists, and we're very glad that you're here. In the context of The Circle and the Circle podcast, this space is really about men's work, and the men's work space, men's work is really a community, it's a movement, it is a series of practices and questions and inquiries and reflections, all geared to help men live more fully and authentically and to break free from some of the cultural indoctrination or expectations that have been placed on us. And at The Circle in particular, we are starting the conversation from the queer male perspective because my personal experience has been that there hasn't been a lot, or there aren't currently a lot of queer men in the space. The space is generally filled with cisgendered straight men. And so when I was in that space, I realized, there are parts of the queer experience or, my own personal gay male experience that I didn't always feel were fully understood. And so that's what we're doing here. And so I'm interested to know, considering that you work largely with gay men, what are some of the most common challenges that you observe in your patients with regards to how they are able to speak about or discuss their health concerns, needs, or treatment desires?
Oh, that's a lot. No, I think that I like to, when I talk to providers and when I was setting up the program, I thought, well, what do I not like about seeking these services? What makes me anxious? What have I been taught through my life? And I think that as queer people, we're taught that if we seek services and we go into them with honesty, then we are shamed or in some way or another where they're either disgusted or there's an area of disbelief. And so we've been taught over the years, and I came out, I'm turning 60 this year, and lived through right before HIV/AIDS came on the scene, and then through that. And so the years of trauma and fear around sex has resulted in, this was before too, but you couldn't be honest when you were seeking services. And so I think that as a community, and to this day, especially thinking about the recent MPOX, it wasn't until we teach each other what to say so that when we seek services, that we don't have to deal with the stigma and the judgment. When I talk to maybe some cisgendered or people who are not used to dealing with our community, I go, you know what, when we walk in, we're dialed up to 9 because of our past experiences or what our expectations are when we go in there. And so you might ask the most benign question to us, and then we fly off the handle because we're anticipating it. We're waiting for it to happen. And it might just be something, it might be the smallest thing, but because you don't deal with it all the time, it sets us off, and we're instantly thinking this person's not able to take care of us. And so there's not only the stigma that's given to us, but the one that we put on ourselves as well. And so it was very important to me to explore, why I felt uncomfortable when I was setting up the program, and also finding out, why providers ask those type of questions that they ask, and then challenging those, or just exploring them and saying like, well, what purposes do those questions have, and how does that help you give me this or give me the care that I need? And so exploring that made me able to help reduce that. I know I got it.
Do you believe that there was a series of questions that were commonly asked to queer men that are not really serving a purpose, and that you have eliminated from your conversation?
One of my cornerstone questions is, I asked, why do you ask us the number of partners we had in the last 6 months? And the answer that I would get is, because that's always been uncomfortable for me, plus also sometimes I'm like, I don't know, what's the number? There's a great section in the city scene where Samantha's, she gets asked that at a clinic, and then she just kind of freezes, and they're like, did you hear me? And she goes, I'm counting. And and I do the same thing where I'm going like, sometimes I know the number, and sometimes I don't know the number. Mm-hmm. And the answer that I would get is like, well, the more partners you have, the more at risk you are for things. And I go, well, I think we all get that. I call it the lottery concept. I go, I know if I buy one lottery ticket that I can win the lottery, but I know if I buy a lot more lottery tickets that I have a better chance of winning it. And so I go, but still, what is that discrete number, ETE, discrete number, do for you as a provider? Like, what are you going to do for me differently if I answer 220 or 200? And I haven't gotten a good answer yet. Mm-hmm. And so I challenge that question. And when I talk to providers, I say the same thing. I had been asked recently, why do you say it's never good, or it's never appropriate to ask that question? I said, well, I've never said that. What I say is that if that question provides your care or guides your care as a provider, then ask it. But if it doesn't, then why are you asking it? And if, and I would explore that the reasons might be, their origin might be in shame, and I didn't want to create that environment. And so, I'm going to have a little disclaimer here, because there is funding. I ask certain questions that are based upon the funding that I get. But I also started off with, I'm going to ask certain questions, and if you feel uncomfortable answering it, you can say pass, and unless it guides the care that I'm going to give you, I'm just going to move on.
Because ultimately, if we talk about an STI like gonorrhea, I could have it after having one partner, or having. So the course of care isn't going to change based on the fact that maybe I had 10 partners and not one. Right. It's just we realize that something is present, and then we treat it, right? Is that the thinking?
Right. The chance, obviously your chances of of getting something or more if you have more partners, and but I think we all get that. And also I think the question could be different. So it's like, are you in a monogamous relationship where you're 1,000% sure that it's monogamous, but also I'm in a sex clinic, so like if someone's like, I'm in a monogamous relationship, and I'm like, well, I think you're in the wrong department. But I don't, I like to use humor a lot. And when I talk to providers, I say, well, like, what are you going to, with that example, like, what are you going to do if I say 200 versus 2? Are you going to swab harder?
Right.
And the answer is, of course not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just finding it. It doesn't matter, how many were there before. It's just finding it, And so I question the origin of that question, and then go from there.
So another thing I heard you say in response was, in response to the challenges that queer men might face when they step into these spaces, is this idea of education and helping to educate people as to how to ask the questions, or the right questions to ask, or the things to look for. And that feels really important to me. I want to share a quick story about education, because I came from a lot of really fear-based thinking around being queer and gay, right? And so when I was a young boy, I was just under the impression that gay men got HIV and AIDS, the way it was talked to me, Right. And so before I learned like how these things actually work, I remember my first HIV test, I was very, very nervous, because I'm like, oh, my mom and my grandmother, they said like, well, this is just coming for me at some point. And when I look back on it, and that was the time when it took 2 weeks to get your results, right? When I look back on it, I think, oh, well, knowing what I know now, I had nothing to worry about. But for 2 weeks, I was pretty terrified because of a fear-based kind of education. So I really feel now how important it is to have a judgment-free place and the right questions to ask, because what ultimately we care about is health and wellness, right? So what are some ways you think we as a community can support each other in this endeavor of more education and supportive, helpful questions?
I think that it's important that we, and it's, like I struggle with it, everybody struggles with it. The ability, there's a power dynamic too with providers. And so I think that asking questions and looking at resources, there's a great website that I refer people to, or that has to do primarily with PrEP, but it's called pleaseprepme.org. And so one of the great things about that site is that it not only has a part for the person seeking PrEP, but it also has provider resources. And it has resources that if your provider is resistant to giving you PrEP, it has examples of how to talk to them about it. And I've had, because we have so many visitors, I'll talk to patients and I'll say, well, here's the site, and you might be able to, like, oh, my PCP won't give me PrEP. They say things like, just use condoms, blah blah blah. So, and I've had different stories where people have reported back and said, I talked to my provider and now they're giving me PrEP. Like they went, oh, I didn't know that it was this easy, and easy is overstating it. But, and I've had some come back that have said they still won't give it to me. And I go, well, I also am a big fan of fire your provider, like it's not easy. There's definitely a shortage all over, and it's hard to do, but also, you deserve care of someone who's going to take care of you. It's called, it's collaborative care. It's not just them telling you what to do and you doing it. It's you saying, this is how it goes in my life, and I can either do it or not do it, or how can I get somewhere there?
Mm-hmm.
So through a conversation like that, really encouraging men to live authentically and bring their authentic selves to their appointments and to start to advocate for themselves. And I think that's a big part of men's work, and the work that we're trying to accomplish here with this podcast is to really get out that message of like really helping people to live more honestly and authentically by connecting with themselves and connecting with others. So go ahead.
I get excited. And I also question how honest we have to be with them. So like, and again, is it the question thing? And so like, I've gotten a lot of providers to say, I'm not going to ask that question anymore, like, or because I say like, well, ask it in a different way, like, do you have one more, like, are you having sex? First of all, sexually active is a horrible question, those kind of things. So, ask the thing that you're trying to get. So like, are you at risk for STIs? Like, so like, have you had sex?
Right. It's about understanding what the intention is behind the question. Like you said, like, is there something shameful inherent in the question?
Yeah.
Or is it truly just trying to get at the root of what somebody might be visiting the clinic or the doctor for? Like, what is that true intention behind it?
And I would say in probably 95% of the cases, it's just because that's how they were trained to do a sexual history. And they haven't even sat down and thought about why they ask it, because I always say, well, what are you going to do if, with the different answers? Like when they think about it, they're like, oh, but even like the CDC, and they put out this guidebook of how to take a sexual health history. And I point out to the providers, I go, on page 3, it says, this is not meant to be a script. It's meant to be examples of what you can ask people to get an idea of their sexual risk. And so, but in so many instances and in so many conferences that I go to, everybody goes, no, I have to ask that question. I have to ask that question. I have to ask that question. I'm like, why? What does it do for you? What does it matter to you? Like, and other questions like, what does it matter if my mouth touches the genitals of someone who identifies as a cisgendered male or a trans female? What does it matter? And so sure, there's data, great. But it doesn't matter medically what I'm doing or what I'm testing you for. And so like, I question those questions. And I think it's important to respectfully, say to providers, and you can even say like, I've always been kind of uncomfortable answering that. What does that do for you? Like, how does that guide what you're going to do for me? And, or just say, what does that do? What does that do for you? And then it gets them thinking about it. And I think that's how, as queer people, we can influence the care that we get. Instead of saying like, you're not supposed to ask me that, just say like, like treating or because they've just been told what to ask. And a lot of times they don't have a malicious thing behind it. They're just asking what they thought they're supposed to ask.
Well, that feels really empowering. This idea of inquiring, what use is that information to you? Because I am fully invested in moving towards my own health and wellness, right? So that feels like a powerful way to engage, because I'm not unwilling to answer the question if it is in service to my highest good. I'm unwilling to answer it if it's just a rote question without any value.
Right.
And then we could talk a little bit about how some of these things might make us feel shame, embarrassed, or we may not be practiced in answering them, so we might have a whole emotional experience around it. But I love that idea, because there's nothing wrong with, I am so invested in my own care that I'm interested in how you're giving it to me.
Yep.
And like really advocating for your own health and wellness.
I agree, but I also think that it comes with a certain level of confidence. Like when you were saying that, like I don't know that I would feel comfortable in that position to like talk to my provider in that way.
Right.
You already said there's a power dynamic at play here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming in at a 9, right? I'm already on edge. I'm already a little anxious for a lot of different reasons. And so now I'm coming in there like, and now I have to advocate for myself. So like,
right.
That's where I think that men's work can really come in useful for a lot of folks, where it's like, okay, like how can we, work on our confidence and work on our ability to be present, to go from a place of reacting to a place of response, where we can accept a question like that. And instead of immediately reacting, because like my immediate reaction would be like, go in, answer the question.
Yeah.
Right. Versus responding and being able to counter it with a follow-up question.
And maybe you don't want to educate everybody. Sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you're just like, I think about all the things that we've learned over the last few years about, Black people trying to advocate for themselves. And sometimes you're just like going, I'm not the spokesperson for my community, and I'm not here to educate each and every person that I run across. And so sometimes you're just tired, and you sometimes just say more than one. I had more than one partner, and if that doesn't get you what you want, say 2. just keep going until they get you what you want, you know? So I think that there's a good value to realizing those limitations as well, and respecting not only yourself, but just your time. We go in there to the office thinking, I might have all this shame, you know, I was raised Catholic and blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. But guess who else was? Your provider. Your provider isn't any more comfortable with some of these subjects as anybody else. And, you know, it's not like you're talking about renal function, you know, or this and that, or something easy. You're talking about sexual health. So there's got all this other stuff, you know, stigma associated with it. I also think about when you think about people who smoke, you know, or people who overeat, you know, and so there are all these things that have some type of, you know, the 7 deadly sins or whatever, when that your provider does not get treated in how to get rid of that themselves. They've got their own baggage that they're coming in with. And that's always, I think, important to realize as we realize, you know, because I know like a lot of your subjects talk about listening to other people and respecting their experiences. And that includes a provider too, you know. It's not our job to take care of the providers, but recognizing that they have their own stuff that they come in with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And having honest conversations can be very uncomfortable, especially in a topic of sexual health or really for me, it's like anytime I go to the doctors, I have to write myself notes, or else I'm going to be so in my own head and like frantic that like I may not reveal what I came there to reveal. I may not have my wits about me to be able to like speak what I'm trying to be there for. And so what I do is I sometimes have to write myself notes. Other times I just have to remind myself like why I'm there. But like being honest can be really hard in these environments where like it doesn't even have to be about sexual health. It could be about anything that I'm at the doctor's for. Just like, not that I'm gonna like lie, but maybe sometimes I might like hide a little information.
Well, it's not uncommon. Like if you think about the dentist, you know, like, do you floss every day? I know a lot of people definitely lie about that question because you're like, I feel a little embarrassed. If the answer isn't what I think you want it to be, there can be a little embarrassment in that.
And I just went to the dentist, and so I always relive this because I had a dentist in San Diego, and I always used to have that same thing of like, oh my God, what am I going to say? You know, but I said, yeah, I didn't, you know, you're going to be mad at me because I didn't floss, you know, that much. And he said, I don't care if you floss. And I was like, what? And this shapes me as a nurse so much, where he said, you only have to floss the teeth that you want to keep. And I was like,
oh my God,
I am a great flosser now. Like, and I'm saying like, oh. And so when I went through nursing school, it was so funny because so many people would be like, I'm going to take care of these people. And I just go, I'm just here to give you information and kind of help you do it. Like I'm not telling you what to do. Like, I'm giving you information. Like, you're going to go home, either do it or not do it. And that's going to be based on a lot of different things. And so I don't, so if you were going to lose 5 pounds and then you come back and you didn't lose 5 pounds, like, that doesn't affect me as a nurse. I'm not your best friend. I'm not your mother. You know, I'm not your boyfriend. I'm not your lover. So I'm like, I go, you're going to leave it out of here. When like, I think about that with case management too. Like, I'm here to give you the tools, but if you don't like, you know, bring me the pay stubs that I need or this and that, like that's not going to result in me losing my insurance. I'm going to feel like it sucks for you if you do lose your insurance because of that, you know? And so that guides my, like, am I going to give you lots of reminders to do it? You know, but when people come back and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I'm sorry. You never have to apologize to me because this also keeps me employed. But it's not going to hurt me. It's not going to hurt me. And it's going to suck for you, you know, and it's not that I'm not empathetic. It's just that it doesn't, and I will think about it because I'll be like, you know, like, because, you know, just because it was grained into my head.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, how can men work with this shame that we can bring into these appointments where like if I'm coming to you with my hat in my hand, wringing it, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I messed up, I failed at what you told me to do, like that's inherent shame. I'm embarrassed and like got all this baggage. So I'm like, how do we start to work with our own like programming and shame to have more honest conversations in healthcare?
I don't know. Please tell me.
I mean, from a men's work perspective, I would say like step one would be just getting clear about what it is we're actually experiencing when we step into that environment. So I have to imagine a lot of people, if they're not going inward, if they're not thinking about their own emotional experience or that sort of thing, you end up in the waiting room and suddenly having a physiological experience of anxiety or some other thing, fear, or whatever, and probably not a lot of context around it. So I would say step one would be like inquiry and identification. So even in one of the examples you gave earlier about not knowing if we're even going to fully answer the question, walking in and saying, oh, I recognize that I'm tired of having to educate my providers, or I recognize that I'm feeling shame, or like this old shame is popping up for me because the answer may not be what is culturally like expected of someone like me. Any of those things, just that awareness, I think, can help you step in and be like, oh, I'm wrestling with some shame right now, and then allowing there to be that space. So that, from a men's work perspective, I think that would be step number one, that awareness. I think what you mentioned, though, it's like it can go further. If you have that awareness, you're probably more likely then to prepare yourself in a way that will buttress you in some of those moments. So it won't necessarily take all of the shame or fear or embarrassment or fatigue or whatever away. But, I might be able to write down my questions that I really need. I might be able to write down reminders to myself on a different sheet of paper, like, you are good and lovable. So yeah, I had 8 partners in the last 2 weeks. And then my little, that I'm making that number up, everyone. But don't judge me. No, but just, and then I have the sheet of paper that maybe says like, you are lovable, like this is fine, or whatever would work. So I think that the men's workspace can provide a lot of foundation for slowly starting to chip away at this. But I would say, I'm 46 years old now. I lived in New York City for 25 years. Now I live in Provincetown. I have been in very friendly places that had a lot of non-judgmental healthcare, and I still sometimes feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
So we also have to recognize it's a journey, because when I step into a non-judgmental medical space, like I have at Outer Cape in Provincetown, there are still moments when I'm like, oh, and it's like that old Catholic teaching.
Yeah. I'm going to throw something else into that. It's not even sometimes that it's the judgment of, or fear of judgment in the healthcare conversation. It's sometimes I'm starting to judge myself in relation to what the subject is. So I'm typically a monogamous gay, right? Like I am prone to being in long-term monogamous relationships. And like the first time that I went to go get prep, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, this isn't my lifestyle. This isn't who I am. And I was just like, I was so in my own head, and it was about my relationship to the gay community, queer community, versus my relationship with my health provider. So I was bringing in something different as well.
Wait, because you felt that you didn't, you were like a little different from the community that you thought you were supposed to be part of?
Exactly. So like I was being told like, oh, you've got to get on prep, you're single now. And I was like, I guess, but like.
I mean, it's so funny because it's the norms of what we're so, like we run the gamut, right? And like, there's people that I've worked with who like, they think every gay is like in a monogamous, thing. And I'm just like, no, honey, you're the unicorn. Like, and,
wait, who people that you work with think that?
Well, I think that some people think that like the goal is this, like, and I'm like, like for you, and so I just have so many stories I can't tell. But
what I want to unpack a little bit here is that there are different parts of what people are bringing in to a healthcare conversation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-talk that's going on. There may be triggers that happen in the conversation. And so we're really just exploring, like, how can we get a message out there to more queer men about, like, how to build confidence, to bring their authenticity into these spaces.
I would, like it sort of brought me back with the prep conversation and the varying degrees of, like, I was in a monogamous relationship, blah, blah, blah. And I think that as someone who lived through, the bad years, I say that if prep came out in 1996, we'd all be on it, like without, so, but because it became something that was a chronic disease that's manageable, that the threat was reduced. And I draw a lot of parallels between that and birth control, because I will have people come in and say, like, oh, I'm in a monogamous relationship now, so I'm going to go off prep. And I'm like, okay, girl. So your homework is to go home and turn on the TV and find some story that's not about somebody cheating. And I go, I don't know you. Here I probably do, but like, I don't know you. I don't know who you're with, and I don't know your relationship, like there's such a myriad of what our relationships are like, that I go, but so, prep is not about your relationship. Prep is about protecting yourself, and it's not. You're not protecting yourself against your partner. You're protecting yourself against HIV. And so, if that partner were to cheat, and if that partner were to cheat and to give you HIV, so like I said to somebody once ago, so if it's something to consider. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Whatever you're going to walk out of here, and you're not going to do something because Jeff said you do it. Think about how, if that's an important value to you, your monogamy, think about how bad it would feel to be cheated on, but even how worse it would be to be cheated on and now you have HIV.
Yeah, and that conversation I did have with a partner, I was in a long-term relationship, and we had the agreement that, like, we're both going to go off of PrEP.
Yeah.
Right? We, like, had that safety and security with each other, and that was our agreement. But then something happened. There was an incident one night. Mm-hmm. There was no infidelity, but there was, like, something that could have happened. Mm-hmm. And I started taking PrEP the next day. Yep. And I didn't have that conversation with them. And then they found out about it. And then we had to have, a deeper conversation. Yeah. And it was like, I was making a healthcare decision for myself. Right. And it caused a lot of friction in the relationship, and, like, so there's a lot of layers here involved.
I can see how it happens, but also I can, I will tell people, I go, listen, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but as, if I step out of my nurse role and now I'm just the gay elder, like, where I say, if your partner is pressuring you not to be on PrEP because of that, I go, then that's worth exploring in whatever, realm that you're in, because that would feel a little abusive to me and a little controlling, and not a little, kidding, pretty controlling. And so, like, or, they probably have issues about that. And their whole thing is, like, if you're on this, that makes it easier to cheat. And so, again, think of how much worse that cheating or that jealousy and everything is with HIV now involved. And so
but even that, complicated. Even that is an act of, like, self-advocacy. Right. That, like, some people struggle with. I myself struggle with that. Yeah. And what I've learned with men's work is to how to better listen to myself, my own personal experience, and to also, like, be an advocate for me. Right.
Mm. And can I go back to one more thing that you said that I loved was, I got all excited and I put up my finger to remind me, the writing down notes, when you go in, because I did this in nursing school, and I was with a family that was, I was a student nurse, and so they were just kind of freaking out, and they had told me that they were just so nervous, and when you're in a hospital, you wait for that 5 minutes that the surgeon's coming around, this and that. So, and I had, like, a little spiral notebook, and so I ripped out my notes and I gave it to them, and I go, write down every question you have. I go, and then they come in here, you ask them every question. I go, and if you don't understand the answer, then you say, I didn't understand that. Or explain it to me like you would a 3-year-old, like, whatever it is. Because when we go into these situations, if we don't have a lot of medical knowledge or even a little medical knowledge, like, we don't and then it's a high pressure situation. They're only in there for a limited amount of time because of insurance things. And so you only have, and it's okay to say like, I didn't really understand that. Can you explain it a different way? And I felt like I had figured out like, oh, that's what a good thing to do. And I still do that to this day where I like, when I go to my provider, I'm like, oh, I want to ask that, because 9 times out of 10, when you leave, you're like, damn it, I didn't ask that,
Yeah, I mean, writing things down, getting it out of the brain onto paper, I mean, it's just a valuable exercise in general. I think of like journaling, right? Just like getting it out there. But what other tools, Tim, do you think would be valuable to help people kind of coming down from that 9 that they may be entering into a healthcare conversation? Like how I get them down to like 7.
I mean,
6.
I think that we could look at basically all of the practices in men's workspaces that we have already discussed. Specifically the ones that will take us to our edges. So whether it's our physical edge or our mental emotional edge, getting familiar with our capacity and the ebbing and flowing of that capacity will help us literally in every situation in which we then meet our capacity, right? Or are being pushed beyond our capacity. And this is a great example of that. So it can maybe seem crazy that, breath work in a men's embodiment circle where we have a long breath retention that is challenging could translate into me being able to ask thoughtful questions, advocating for my own health and wellness. But it can, because what you will do is you will in a safe training environment get to a place where you feel very uncomfortable, very, on the verge of reaction, and you will know what that feels like. You'll start to get familiar with, I'm starting to feel my edge approaching. And then hopefully, if you do it enough, you have a tool set that you can start to utilize in that moment. So for me, grounding exercises that I've definitely used, prior to dental appointments or I've had numerous surgeries and have gone to the hospital with a lot of anxiety because they're going to drill into my head or they're going to cut my shoulder open or, whatever the thing that was. And so I have used a lot of breath. I've sometimes used the shaking to go into the bathroom and shake to discharge some of that nervous energy. So I would say, any of the practices that we do typically, movement, breath, sound, visualization, attention. For some people, meditation might be their go-to. As you just mentioned, sometimes journaling. And before I journal my questions to the doctor, I might journal a page about how freaked out I am. I might journal like a mention of what education I had been given that I am now having to kind of sift through so that I can have clarity around why I feel embarrassed when someone, even a non-judgmental caregiver, is asking me about my sexual activity. So I would say on some level, kind of all of it.
When you mentioned that, it made me think of the experience of going to the provider. And so you go check in and then you're waiting and this and that and everybody's out there and there's just all this tension around you and all this. And I go, and then you get in there and they take your, they do your vitals and then you're waiting there for who knows how long. And I think that's a great time where you can do things like, I know sometimes I'll play like Sudoku or something like that. And so like you can turn on your little white noise machine, and you can do that meditation while you're doing that. You can get up. I think that some people feel that when you're put in the chair, or on the table, that you're stuck there. It's like nobody else is in the room. You can do almost everything, whatever you want, So if you want to get up and shake,
Mm-hmm.
nobody's in that room with you.
Yeah.
So go ahead and do it. If you need to go like, or, like all those things to get going, do it. Like, who's going to see it, And then the doctor might walk in and, and if you turn and said like, I get nervous when I do this, and so this makes me feel better about it. They'd be like, they're going to get it because they deal with that all day long.
I love that you just improv'd some like totally valid embodiment practices. So like, thank you for that, like modeling it in real time. And I will say, I was one time at the doctor and I was waiting for a long time. This was last year. And I just happened to also be choreographing a Christmas show in town. And so I was like, well, I'm going to use this time. And I put my headphones on and I started like working through the choreography, and the doctor walked in
Yeah.
to see me dancing, and I was like, I'm choreographing a show, and then like I had no shame about it whatsoever, because I'm like, well, you kept me waiting, so what am I going to do? Like,
yeah. And I will guarantee you, like, so many people take that as, I don't know every situation, but I will guarantee you, especially at a rural health clinic, where we are not reimbursed for, like, I will guarantee you that your doctor is not sitting in the office eating bonbons. Like, they're returning phone calls from hospitals. They're doing this. I go, there's so much to do, and then they're just jammed one right after the other. And I'm not saying don't be. Your time is valuable, and I go, and I get that, but it's more I would say it's more the system issue. It's a problem of the system, and your provider, I know, feels it, and I'm not saying everybody gets a clean slate. I'm just saying that I will. I always, when people say like, I had to wait an hour, blah, blah, and I go, yeah, I completely get it. It sucks. And I go, and I always say, but I will guarantee you that, no, I know that provider, and they're not just sitting in the office doing a Sudoku, and waiting to go in there. They're dealing with the person in front of you who had the same time visit might have 20 things going on, and you've got one thing. Like, it doesn't justify it. It's not a problem of the provider. It's really the system, and they're just as frustrated as you are. And so maybe that's a way to put it on the same, like, your doctor is probably just as frustrated that they have 10 minutes with you as you are. And so
I have two things that I'm hearing. One is it's a friendly reminder, once again, that like trying not to take too much personally, right? Like the questions that a provider may be asking, like if I can kind of like remove myself from it and just kind of be like, okay, like what's the intention behind this question, and how can I answer this as honestly as possible that's comfortable for me, taking a little bit of like that, taking it personally out of it. So like that's also very valuable. And I'm also curious, like as a provider, like on the other side, what are some of the ways in which you take care of yourself and you kind of like ground yourself before you go into an appointment, knowing that you've just had to deal with a bunch of other stuff, whether that's paperwork, returning calls, all this stuff. So we talked on the patient side, some ways that, we've self-advocated and kind of self-soothed, but what about for yourself? How do you take care of yourself?
I'm the luckiest provider in the world, because I'm not real. I mean, am I a provider? Yeah, in some way. I'm a nurse, and I work under standing orders, which allows me to do certain things, but I also run a free program, and what I do doesn't take very long, and so like I have tried to go like, how can I make, like, this isn't that complicated, when I named it, I named it Test and Treat, and I'm like, because as one word, I'm like, you can't have one without the other, but also when you remove a lot of the stuff that, and also they're coming to me for sexual health services. So like that eliminates a lot of the questions there. I run a free program. I provide services that they rarely get. So I have the sweetest deal in the world. So I don't have the same stresses that a lot of providers do. And so I'm extremely lucky. I do get frustrated with some things, but even then I go like, oh, if that's the worst problem I have today, oh my God, I'm so lucky.
So what I'm hearing is you take care of yourself with gratitude.
I get to be the good guy, like, so many people come in and they're like, I've had people crying in the clinic going like, this is so amazing. And I joke around, I say like they're sitting there going, once they have the relief that I'm not judging them, because I'll use terms that we all use. Sometimes I'll throw a girl here and there, and once they get that relief, like that, I've had people go like, this is the most amazing program, and I just go, and I look around and go, okay, it's fine. But then I say, the reason why this is so great is because it just sucks everywhere else. Like it's so bad so many other places that this, program is just looked at as this queer, like light on a hill. And, I go to conferences and people are like, you're a rock star. And I'm like, ugh, all I did was remove all, not completely remove, there's still things I have to do, but everybody has sex, that's how I all got here, so like this whole judgment, I just don't do it. And so it's, when they pick up on it. I've had people who are like, yeah, I'm looking for PrEP because, I always use condoms, but what if they break? I want to make sure that if they break, and I just go, okay, I just keep moving on. And then so this is a specific, that happened once. And then they picked up that I wasn't judging them for anything. And they just go, I feel like I have to come clean about something. And I was like, okay, what? And they're like, I don't really use condoms. And I go, okay. Like, yeah. I go, so let's, this is how PrEP protects you and, how it doesn't protect you. And I go, but
being able to relate to your provider is so important to feeling comfortable and safe in an environment to reveal your authenticity, to reveal your truths, to reveal like what it is that you're actually trying to communicate and express.
Yep.
Like we've talked about it with seeking out therapy and wanting to find a queer therapist so that like that person has an understanding of where we're coming from, and there's not this like this need to like explain ourselves or like hide certain parts. It's like there's a relief that comes when we can relate to the provider.
Right. That reminds me. I think I love this one story where it's like I was in a conference once where I was challenging the number of partners question with someone, and someone who had degrees much more higher than I was like really trying to challenge me on it. And they were saying like, well, something about like if they have the reason why you want to know how many partners is if they have a fissure down there, then you want to know, and I'm sitting there going like, and I'm looking like, and he stops and I go, a fissure? Are you serious? I go, someone comes in with a fissure and the first thing you want to think about is the number of partners? And I go, what? That doesn't tell you anything. What if it's one person 200 times or 200 people once? Like, it doesn't even make any sense. And he's like, it's like, but it also shows that, what people think the queer experience is.
It also makes me think like that person is assuming as well, right? Like, oh, that's a bottom. Like this is a gay person and they're a bottom. They're only doing anal. Right. And it's like there's a lot of things that we do.
Or maybe there's a top that shoved a toy in them that was too big, and they were just like, they never had anything in there,
Right. But just the assumption as well that like because we're gay men, that like our only sexual activity is anal sex. Yeah. And it's like
take care of the fissure.
Yeah.
When it came back to me, the way I kind of went into it, I was like, when I think about sexual health and I go, well, what's the goal? Like what is a provider's goal? So when I talk to providers, I have, I bring out two fingers and I go at one end of the spectrum, I'm at home wrapped in bubble wrap and I never touch another human being. And the other end of the spectrum, I'm in a sling 24/7, just taking, person after person. And I go, so where, hello. And I go, so where is that person on that spectrum? They're not at home wrapped in bubble wrap. Is my goal to get them to never touch another human being? And I go, I don't want them to do that. And so like when we talk about the number of partners and all that kind of stuff, it's like, what's your goal as a provider? So if they say 4, are you trying to get them to 3? And like, I don't understand. And that concept is so, different, And so I approach it as, I want you to have I want you to have as little or as much sex with as many or as few partners consenting that you want and that want to have sex. And I go, so I don't have anything in the game for it, and whether you're having multiple sex partners, because as guys, sometimes it's a lot easier to do it, and sometimes it's very transactional. And I go, or because it's at some sort of trauma, that's not my department. My department is just to keep safe while you do it. It's not. I don't have a dog in this fight for like going. I should probably use a different analogy than that.
I think it's
something less violent.
Right. I said this earlier. Like, but me as the patient, like I may be like taking things really personally.
Right.
And I've got to remove myself out of it by saying that like my care provider actually probably doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right. They care about my well-being, but they don't care about like the number of sexual partners I've had, or like all these things that I'm thinking that they care about because I have a narrative going on in my own head about it.
Well, there's also though I will push back a little bit. The sex education that I received in school was abstinence only.
Oh yeah.
And it was framed in a Christian framework. So I do think sometimes there's an assumption that the way it should work is that you should be abstinent until you find that one true love, and then with that person be monogamous. So I want to make sure that we're being really mindful. Like everyone in this room right now has the luxury of very non-judgmental care.
Right.
But I imagine some listeners might be going to care providers who have a very different framework or understanding of like how relationships can or should look. And I do think the gay male community, especially the one we see in Provincetown and in big cities, operate really differently than, you know, many of the straight people that I know. When I think about like how we gather, how we connect, and just expectations about, you know, partners and activities and things like that. So it does seem possible that that a person might find a caregiver with a strong idea of what it's supposed to be.
But then it's like, maybe to your earlier point, like, how do we build confidence to fire your caregiver, to like say this PCP is not the person for me? And I know that it's a very fortunate position to be in, that like maybe I have access to multiple PCPs, but like, you know, it's also building up that confidence that like, I still believe that like, if we can kind of remove ourselves a little bit from like the accepting the judgment of somebody else and self-advocating for ourselves, then we can have healthier, robust conversations about our own healthcare. And if I can't have that conversation with somebody, then I have to go find somebody else to do it with.
Well, to be clear, I'm in agreement with you, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't saying that it's only our preconceived notions that we're walking into. Like, it is possible that that provider has them too.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
And I would say also, I think that as you said earlier, it's important to feel safe in your environment. And I think that, you know, as this goes out to a lot of different places, and maybe even, you know, as close as 10 miles away, you know, that it's okay to, when you think about these, the parts of healthcare that are judgmental or not, you know, so like overeating, you know, or sex, you know, and smoking, things like that. So those are, you know, just drinking, those kind of things, drinking and drug use, those kind of things off the top of my head. You know, no one's going to go in there and go like, oh, I fell down a flight of stairs, and go like, stupid idiot, you know. And so like, if you can't get it by being completely honest, that it might be okay to say just enough to get what you need. You know what I mean?
Sounds like strategically choosing.
Right. If you're stuck with that provider, and if you're, let's say that you're moving to get a new PCP, it might take a while to do that. So how do you get what you want while still being with that person, and accepting their limitations, and saying like, okay, you know, I'm not here to fix that person, you know, but that's not the right person for me. And maybe me opening up a spot for that person gets someone else who fits with them in, you know. And so, but I think the reason why I approached this whole thing was to say like, it's important for us to be able to seek services and to get what we want. And maybe we don't have to be 1,000% honest, you know, because of, are we safe or not? You know, it might be you walk in and, I mean, I would get messages, you know, like I get messages like, I was a big hoe last week, you know, can I come in for testing? I'm like, sure. You know, so I'm sure that it's not the experience in a lot of places across the country. You know? Well,
we've talked about this on this podcast before, and this has been a really big part of my life, how queer men, queer people, me as a gay man, I had to learn how to lie and manipulate in order to maintain my safety. And so it's this game to be like, oh, I'm kind of constantly looking around to figure out like what I need to do in order to not put a target on my back, or to call attention to myself, or, you know, to keep myself safe in many ways. And I feel like this is that too. If you don't have the luxury of the kind of care that we are fortunate to have here in Provincetown and some other places, you know, scattered across our country, then it is totally legitimate to do what is needed to keep yourself safe. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
How about those Red Sox?
Exactly. Yes.
No, do you know the score? No, but I know the lyrics. No, it is. It's complete. It's code changing. It's just like, you know, when I think about, you know, like, you know, if it was up to me to lead the revolution of like, I could pass, you know, well, maybe not so much now, but like if it was up to like leading the fight in the beginning, I'm not going to be that person. But it's the people who can't who can't hide it. And so like I think that it's okay to be able to use that to our advantage when we need to.
Well, I have a question for you. I'm going to tell a story and leave the names out, but there was a friend of mine who went...
Just bleep them out.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
a friend of mine who went to see their primary care. They had a bump on their scrotum, and they were concerned that it was genital herpes. They got to the doctor looked at the bump and was like, that's not genital herpes, and then walked out of the room and like that was over. So then that person then later, I don't know how shortly thereafter, a day or two, went to the dermatologist, and the dermatologist was like, oh, that's a genital wart. And my friend said, oh, I just went to the doctor, and the dermatologist said, I'm surprised they didn't tell you.
Yeah.
And then, so we will take care of it here.
Yeah.
From your perspective, do you think that that's an opportunity to go back to that provider and ask questions about, why didn't you tell me, or did you not know? Because the dermatologist made it seem that it was crystal clear. And so there was this question mark, why didn't my primary care tell me you told me what it wasn't, but you didn't tell me what it was. So do you think, like if we think about advocacy,
sure,
is that a thing that would be helpful? Is that the patient's responsibility? Like, what is your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's your responsibility. I think that if you have a relationship with that first person that you went to, if that's your primary care, then I think it's worth mentioning that was, but I also like to tell people that, that your primary care is a jack of all trades. Like they're not dermatologists, they're not specialists. Now, was this a textbook lesion? That they should have known that, like maybe not. I don't know, obviously the situation, but like your primary care is meant to be the stepping board to the other places. Like if you have heart issues, you don't want your primary care doing all that stuff. You want to go get a cardiologist, and that kind of thing. So now there is, like when PrEP first came out, they used to refer people to infectious disease specialists, it was ridiculous, and now it's just part of primary care. And so some things kind of remove in the reverse, so it's like, because they'd get to the infectious disease specialist and they'd go, here. It wasn't that easy, but, and so I think it's important to realize that your primary care has limits. They're not, there's a reason why specialists are specialists and why they're making the big money is because they know what they know. And actually the reason why I got in, first of all, I have HIV, but also getting into HIV case management and all this, I came in, I graduated nursing and I was working as a staff nurse in Wellfleet. And I was just like going, I feel like I know 75% of everything and I don't know 90% of anything. And so I wanted to focus on that, which I should have been focusing on myself since I already, was already living with it, but now I know a lot about one little area. And so when I approach a provider about, they didn't talk to this person about this, I go, listen, this is my world. And I'm making a little tiny circle and I can make a huge circle because this is your world. And I go, and I know that and I respect that. It's not going to stop me from addressing what's in my little world with you, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that I know that you are doing I've got 3 areas that I'm working on, you got the rest. So, and all the different parts. But so I think it's important to recognize that. And, I wouldn't go back and go like, you were wrong, but also, was it an extreme? There's a lot of different possibilities on why that situation happened. But I think it's up to you in the relationship. If I had gone to urgent care and I didn't know that person and then I went to somewhere else, and I wouldn't go back to the urgent care and say that. But if I have a relationship with my PCP, this is all internal. Like, I don't know if I would feel comfortable going back and say we were doing it, but I think you can weigh out what it's worth to you and go, oh, by the way, that was actually, and they'd probably be like, oh, really? And they're probably going to go in the back and go like, oh shit, like what, because they're human. They care about, and going back to what we were saying before, I didn't want to say like, oh, we're disassociated from our patients. We obviously care, but not too much.
Well, it's a good example. It seems to me like a good example that of, as a queer person, with the education and history or potential trauma that we had. In this example, my friend was wondering if it had to do with their sexuality, or it might have been. But also, what I'm hearing you say is a very compassionate, sort of understanding, benefit of the doubt approach too, which I like, because chances are most of the medical providers that I know are well-intended, hardworking people who are seeing lots of people, for 5 days a week, So
second opinions are great. Get second opinions. It's okay.
Which is essentially
if
what
you're
happened.
not getting something from another one, to see somebody else. So go to urgent care, go to this, and I make it sound super simple. Like you're just going to walk in and get all this stuff, like just pick up a bag of ice from the grocery. And so I know that it's not that, but
I love it because what this does is it gives me confidence, right? Like I don't, as a patient, I don't understand that I can go get a second opinion, but hearing it, what I'm hearing is oh, you have permission to, right? It may not be easy, right? We're not saying that it's going to be easy, but you have permission. You have permission to advocate for yourself. You have permission to go out and get that second opinion. You have permission that if there is something that you want to address, bring it up, but bring it up with empathy. Yeah. Bring it up with empathy for yourself, with empathy for your provider, right? And do it from a place of deep care.
Yeah,
that's what this is. It's health care.
Yeah, my goal is not to get someone in prep. My goal is to make it as easy as possible, because I know it's difficult.
So I want to ask both of you one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners to feel more empowered and confident during their healthcare visits. Tim, we'll start with you.
I would encourage or invite people to get clear about what scares them. And this is work that you can do entirely on your own, in the circle, the Monday sharing circle. When we journal, I tell people, this piece of paper is for you. No one's going to see what you write down. You can share any of that you want. So in a safe space, get clear about what scares you, what you're frightened of, all of the different things that you are concerned about, so that you have greater clarity around what it is you're actually working with. Because I think, and I've seen a lot in men's work, sometimes you don't even know the depth of what you're holding or carrying, and then it can spill out in a way that it feels very overwhelming. The more we can slowly uncover all these things that we're working with, the more power we have then in making conscious choice around it. So what frightens you, or what are you scared of with regards, in this case, with regards to your own health, and what are you wanting? I think getting clear about what are you wanting. So in the coach training that I did, one of the most powerful questions you can ask somebody is, what do you want? And it seems really simple, right? This idea of, well, what do I want? Mm-hmm. But you have to think about it. What do I want? And so with my healthcare, what do I want? And I would encourage every person to really sit with it. Instead of I want a healthy heart, or I want to lose weight. That might be right, but really think about it. What do I want? Do I want to be able to pick up my grandchildren? A lot of people, that's their answer. I want to be able to garden because I love gardening, but now my knees hurt. I want to be able to, and then play pickleball or get back to tennis or into the swimming pool. And you start making decisions about, okay, well then what will it take? If you go in without a clear idea of what you want, then it'll influence your questions in your conversation. So I think, what are you afraid of? What are you concerned about? And what do you want? And make it a personal exploration that you can bring with you. That would be my advice or invitation.
That's great advice, because it even gets me thinking, if I want healthier knees because I love gardening, I might be afraid that if I bring up something to the doctor, that I might get a truth that is scary. That it's oh, maybe I can't garden anymore, right. Or I have to figure out a different way to garden. Right. So that's really great advice of just unpacking my own fears, and what my fears might be preventing me from bringing into the conversation.
If I could just share a story, because I just did a private training/yoga session with a client, and this client has hand-wrist issues that makes things challenging and makes standard yoga, as I tend to teach it to most people, challenging and like in need of a lot of modification. But then we were able to find it. So once you get clear about what you're working with, from that place, you can start making choices about, well, how can I approach this differently? And so I ended up giving him this version of my general warm-up, like some spinal warm-up of like cat-cow and side bends and, quadruped Sufi grind, blah, 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 whatever. We were able to do it in a seated position that gave him all of the spinal mobility that he wanted without taxing his wrist. And he was like, oh, I feel my core. So it's a good example of how empowering it was to recognize what is it you want and what is one of our challenges that we need to include in this view. Now, I have to imagine that there are a lot of examples where the solution maybe isn't always so satisfying. So sure, that's a rosy picture. And I want to honor, having had major health concerns of my own, like sometimes the answers aren't so rosy and we have to hold space for that too. But it was through the knowledge of what they were working with and what they wanted that we were able to get somewhere of value to them. If I could somehow project into every listener's brain right now, the smile on this person's face when they felt their spine opening up in a way that was not contributing to pain somewhere else, it was like worth every penny. So yes.
Beautiful.
Thank you for listening to that.
Thank you for sharing.
And it made me think of we all go into, so much of this has been about seeking healthcare, and the things that we do. And I go, but that's not my thing because I've reached a certain level of it. And now that I'm an advocate, it's not a scary place for me, but my scary place is the gym. My scary place is going to things like that because I'm incredibly intimidated because of, high school and all that kind of stuff. So when I think about going to the places here, and especially when, that is so, I'm probably getting sweaty right now just thinking about it. Probably not in a good way. But that's incredibly intimidating to me. And I've done the years of buying memberships, and then I go once, and then I'm right back in high school, and so, and so thinking about what we discussed today, it makes me go oh, I could, doing something beforehand of going, okay, I'm just gonna I'm gonna go in there, and every time I've been there, people have been supportive and this and that, but still in my mind, someone says one thing that is I'm taking as you're fat, get out, and so, and it could be just hey, how are you today? Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Oh, okay, fine. I haven't been here. And so I'm already dialed up to 9 when I go there, and so if someone says there, I've just lost a lot of weight with, with the injections, and someone said oh my God, you're just wasting away. And I heard I'm wasting away because of AIDS, and so and they're just going oh, you're getting thin. And so I had to sit there for a few minutes and go, I am 99.9999% sure that they were not saying that I look sick, and so, but I had to talk myself out of that, and I had to spend a minute with it and dial it back and go oh, it's okay,
how much empathy can you bring to yourself to not take things personally?
Right, and so
right, so that you can go into a situation that is in service of your best self.
Right,
and to take care of something that you really want, to Tim's point of identifying what am I afraid of, what am I scared of right now, and what am I needing and or wanting, right? And how do I work with both of those things?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, Jeff. One piece of advice you would give to a queer man looking to feel more empowered and confident during healthcare visits?
I would just say, realize that everyone there is human as well. And so what we talked about with, if the front desk person is not great, if the MA or the nurse or the doctor is not great, and it's not easy to do, but I think to have that somewhere in your mind of I think about the same thing when I wait on tables, because I still work in a restaurant where I go I don't know this person's history. And if they come in and they're being a jerk right from the point, I am pretty sure that they're not standing outside the restaurant going, I'm going to go in there and ruin Jeff's day. We all have lives and we all got this. So whatever's affecting them is affecting how they're treating me in this moment, and so and they might just be an asshole, but but I'm not going to jump to that as number one, because I think that's because you guys talked about story and intention, right? I had listened to that, and so like I'm instantly going to the story, and not and now when I try to take that, and so I think as a patient, when I do that too, I go like, oh, this person might not be giving me what I need, and I need to not take it as that person is not giving it to me. They're not the gatekeeper. They're one of many gatekeepers, and so like to be tenacious and be assertive and to get the healthcare you need, regardless of what that is, and to give feedback, and so I think it is important to, if you feel like it's important to give feedback, then it's important to give feedback, because that will help. And so I think really people are human. They have all different experiences, and as well as we do.
We are humans, and we're having human experiences, as Tim has beautifully said it in the past. Like this is shared human experience, and the more curiosity and empathy that we can bring to these types of experience, the more care that we can give to ourselves, we can give to others, and understanding. So this episode, I think we covered a lot of ground when it comes to showing up for yourself, showing up for others, how to tap into your authenticity, to find the courage and the confidence to come into these conversations and reveal as much as is needed in order to get the healthcare that you are needing. So with that, I'm feeling very complete. How about you all?
Yeah.
I'm feeling very complete. So let's take a moment to close our eyes. Take a deep inhale through the nose. Gentle exhale through the mouth. And as we leave this sacred circle and conversation, I wish us all health, courage, community, support, love. And with these words, our container is open but not broken. Aho.
Aho.